Cool.
Hello, everyone. This is Gruesome Hertzogg. My very special guest is director John Isberg. He's responsible for a hidden gem that I found. It was called Final Summer in 2023. John, how are you?
Good. Thanks. Got a little coffee, so I'm feeling a little bit better now. So yeah.
Me too. I have some too.
Yeah. Thanks for taking time out and everything. It's
no problem. You know,
sorry, you're saying.
Go ahead.
Oh no,
I can. Yeah. Try that again. Go ahead.
It's all good. Maybe I should not have had coffee beforehand, but yeah. Thanks again for having me.
No problem. Now, every now and then, I've been doing this for, it's like a broken record. I've been doing this for 13 years. I started out back in 2010, back when independent films started to be direct-to-video or low-budget, medium-budget films. So I kind of fell in love with those films because, for the longest time, all you would get at the Blockbuster would be, bigger budget films. They're cool and all, but once I got a taste of the independent circuit, I was hooked, line, and sinker. So I've come across a lot of films over the years, and I came across Final Summer. Now, I'm sure when you see it, the cover of the movie, it has it takes place in 91, but I call it an 80s throwback because you have the summer camp, you have the Jason feel, you have the, all of it in one. And I think what's most impressive about this movie is the cast. In most of these films, and I don't mean this in a harsh way, listeners, if you hear me, you don't see heavier set people in films. You don't see your film was more realistic because not everybody is 110 pounds or whatever. He had characters in this film that will attract people because it's more realistic wise as far as the cast. The whole cast was absolutely fucking brilliant. And the killer, you don't know who it is, but there's one scene I saw in your teaser trailer. I saw it in the movie too, of course. Is the scene where you see him standing, looking on an angle with the axe in his hand, was one of the most creepiest, coolest, cheesy throwbacks I've ever seen in my life, and I fucking absolutely love that.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Yeah. We could talk about the cast because that was a big part of kind of the direction I wanted to do on this one. I kind of, like I'm sure you've seen a lot of slasher films. I just remember a lot of the early 2000s slasher films and the late 90s slasher films where everybody was like this beautiful, like they were like the cast of the CW and like, Abercrombie and Fitch models. And I just never could relate to them at all. And I always thought it was funny because then to go back to the early 80s slashers, it's like everybody's like 35 and in high school. But for some reason, I found that more appealing to me, I think, than just like these other kind of impossibly beautiful people that I don't really care about at all. And so that was kind of a big part of that was kind of casting to people who just felt real, and so and then I knew that we weren't like like in any kind of a major casting area, and so I just looked at kind of like took a page from Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where he looked at UT Austin BFA and acting program students, and so that's kind of where I got a lot of the cast. And then there are people in the local like theater scene too who I had seen or who I'd kind of worked with on music videos and stuff, and so it was fun to write to them. But I totally agree with you in that where I wanted the audience to be able to relate to the characters and to see themselves in the characters. And I think a lot of the humor in the film comes from like the reality of a situation like that, where I wanted to feel like, what if you were really in a slasher film? Not like what you think you would do, because I've read plenty of reviews of people who tell me like, oh, I'm like, yeah, but that's what you think you would do. You think you would look after the killer when he shows up, but no, you would not do that. So
yes,
it was fun to kind of to take that angle on it and just have a lot of fun with it. And the cast was great. I mean, a lot of them, because they had gone through 4 years of the acting program at University of Illinois, they were kind of close already, several of the main cast. And then other people I just worked with, like Wyatt Tabor, who plays Peter. I always really liked him a lot, and I just felt like Peter should be this kind of awkward, nerdy, not like a nerd, but just kind of like this kid who's just hopelessly, not cool, which I kind of felt like that was me when I was his age. So, just always with the guitar, trying to like play an acoustic song for some girl to impress her and shit like that. So it was a lot of fun to bring the cast to life. And then as we went through, certain people would stand out. Like I think Mario, I was always like, I would tell Miles Valentine, I'm like, you're kind of the secret weapon of the film to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, I was lucky because I think that's the problem with a lot of slasher films is that you don't really know who they are. And, even by the end of the film, they're like dying off. Who was that person? I think there was one Friday the 13th where I didn't even know the name of the final girl at the end of the film. I'm like, dude, okay. Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, when I started watching this, I'm thinking, wow, there's certain films that sticks in my craw, that really, it gets me to where this is cool. No matter what, this is cool. It's hard to explain. I'm trying to explain it. Watching this film, I'll keep repeating myself. Watching this film, I'm thinking that I'm 16, 15 years old, watching an old 80s cheese bag. And I say that in a good way. I love 80s cheese. It does not matter what it is.
Yeah.
You had Tom Matthews. Obviously, we know him from the Friday the 13th, part 6, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Bishop Stevens.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of the cast itself, just like Deputy Hodges is Carl Bailey. Right. You have all this in together. It's like it just, I'm just speechless. I'm blown away by how it turned out. I mean, it's not like it's not no $100 million budget or whatever.
No, not at all.
But it was shot very well. It was shot like a freaking 80s movie. That's all I can say. I'm telling you, you rocked it.
Oh,
I mean, I don't know if it was intentional or not.
Yeah.
But when you can make a comedy horror like this, you have that throwback. I mean, I'm being thrown back to my childhood watching this movie.
Right.
That's no bullshit.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, just a lot to that. I think, one, I think that the camp really did a lot of heavy lifting with the period, which was nice because, I found this Boy Scout camp about 30 minutes east of me. I live in Champaign-Urbana, and there was this old Boy Scout camp kind of built in the 50s, and it was kind of a smaller, kind of off the beaten path kind of camp. And so it wasn't a lot of like new improvements or anything like that. And so when I went there to look at it, I was like, oh man, like this could do so much of the film. And then, going into that, like that time period of 91, but yeah, to your point, I think like it was set in 1991 to kind of get us out of the 80s, but also I love the early 80s slasher film look. And so where like, I think the interesting thing I found is like people, I just went to see The Creator the other night, and it was like this beautiful film, and they used like old anamorphic lenses, which we shot on as well. And so anamorphic lenses are just a little bit softer than, your normal modern films, which are like overly clinically sharp. And so when I see a lot of throwback slashers that are shot now, it's like they shoot it in a way that it looks modern. And I wanted it to feel like a long lost 80s slasher franchise that you're like, what? How have I never heard of this Final Summer before? And so that's where I think the anamorphic kind of played a big part of that too, because it is softer. And then we were shooting like kind of much like wider open, and so the lenses are even more soft. And so I think it was funny because I watched Halloween the other night, like on my projector, and then I watched Final Summer after that, and I was like, the image just felt the same to me. It had the same kind of softness. It had the same
Mm-hmm.
lens character, and so I
Yep.
think it was really cool because to me, I was a kid in the '80s. I was born in '76. I'm Gen X, but I couldn't watch these films, because my parents were like, "Oh, it's evil" and whatever. But but I think that the films loomed large to me in my mind and in my kind of daydreams or whatever. And so I was so I kind of wanted to make like the most to me like the most fun version of a Friday the 13th kind of a film where it is like that summer camp slasher, but it feels from that time period. So even like I love like movies like Final Exam to talk about like indie like kind of like regional horror films of the '80s where they're
Mm-hmm.
shot softer, the character's a little bit corny. Like there's scenes in the film in my film that I always laugh at because it's like this is the corniest, cheesiest scene.
But I eat it up.
Yeah.
I can pull.
Because all those films have those moments where you're just like, where are they going with this? Or
The
like,
boogeyman,
oh, totally, yeah. Or you damn fool kids never learn, and like
Mhm.
Friday the 13th was like it's got a death curse, and I just love that kind of stuff where I
Yeah.
think a lot of modern horror films they get too heavy with the seriousness, and I still love like I mean to me I kind of wanted to throw a little bit of that Lost Boys kind of sensibility into the film because I love the Lost Boys a lot and the humor and it's not always just heavy depressing stuff it's kind of it's just the humor of it and the fun of it so yeah so
I like how you threw a character by the name of Dougie.
oh,
Dougie's character was perfect.
yeah
We always have a Dougie, you know.
right yeah I mean he's kind of like what's his name Steve what's the original Steve from the first Friday the 13th right the guy who
Yes.
killed or something like that with like he had the necktie or whatever I don't know or
Yep.
the neckerchief. It was funny
But
that
I
we did
yeah.
this one shot and I just died laughing because like it's kind of like he was supposed to come in like it's when all the counselors are standing outside and they see Warren Copper go to see his grandson there at the ambulance and then like Dougie's supposed to walk in and say like oh it's Warren Copper or something but it was on a wider shot than the one that was in the film but he had these sunglasses on. He looked like Jim Morrison. Like he just walked. He walked into the shot like Jim Morrison from The Doors, and I just lost it because it was so like. I was like, yeah, let's lose those glasses.
Oh my god.
It's so crazy. But no, that's my friend Jace Jameson. He's a local actor in Champaign, and he was really good because I think some of the characters I think in some of these slasher films, it's because you get into the tropes and the cliches of the characters and some of the characters I think are tough because they're kind of meant to be exposition. So I think Dougie was interesting because he had a lot of exposition beats, but then there were times when he could kind of like I think the fun of him was when he sees like this there's something else going on here, and he comes back and he's like let's get out of here, like that was kind of fun for me because I feel like it's because usually in films there's always those characters who are like nothing's wrong ever, until the axe is in their forehead. And so I wanted something to be, because I think I've seen so many slasher films and you're always like, dude, you should probably leave right now. Like, why are you guys still here at this?
That's
like, go.
right.
At no point is anyone like, yeah, we should probably just go. Actually, let's just get the hell out of here. Let's just hang out at the bar, like in Friday the 13th Part 2.
Well, then again, I think that also. I think, well, if they do, then it wouldn't be a movie, obviously.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then it's like,
it's like you have to get past the actual human nature of it,
right?
Yeah.
For the movie to happen. Yeah. There's a really funny like YouTube channel. It's like all about these. It's like pitch meetings or something like that, where this guy plays himself like a producer and the pitcher, and it's I don't know if you ever seen this, but it's so funny. It's like because the movie has to happen. Oh yeah. So anyway, and then it's just it's really funny, but yeah. So
there's been some quite a few of these throwback '80s films that I really enjoy because I mean, I'm 55, so I grew up in that early stages of the VHS tapes. And also in your film too, I mentioned my review, if I'm mistaken, is you have that early 1980-81 kill scenes. Now, a lot of reviewers that I've seen in the past are like gore mongrels, okay? Which is, gore is fun, but it doesn't have to be gory to be good. And when I love the aspect of it is when the camera pulls back. You know, you see a knife going up or an axe. You know the person's dead. You don't need to see it.
Right.
And I think that's also what you did in this film too. I mentioned is that really brought it forward. Thinking, you know, I understand that it takes money for graphics, and I would sooner somebody do that than try to make ketchup water for blood.
Oh
It
yeah,
doesn't work for me. It doesn't work.
Right.
I mean, when I review films, I don't pick at stuff because I'm an actor in the business myself and a voice actor and a producer for like 13 films, and I understand all that. So I don't pick at that, but I prefer not to see. Unless it's a filmmaker's first film, I get it because it takes effort and pride and hard work to get your first film out, and I'll accept it. But when it starts going to film 3, 4, 5, and 6, and you're still doing it, I'm kind of over it now. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I love the aspect. I mean, I'm sure it was not intentional, but you did your homework. You know, you mentioned the final exam. Lately, I've been posting some early 80s trailers on my YouTube channel, the ones that allow me to anyways, because of the copyright stuff.
Right.
And I've been posting some of them lately just to, you know, it gives other people something to come to my page to look at other than reviews and interviews and stuff. And that's what I'm saying. I'm watching these trailers and then I'm thinking, you know, Final Summer is very close to this film. Now, you remember Wrong Turn?
Yeah.
Came out in 2003.
Yeah.
I just realized there's a movie from 1980-81 that story was based off of.
Huh.
I did not realize it. I'm assuming because it had the same idea as far as that guy climbing the cliff and all that stuff there.
Oh, yeah.
Let me
Deliverance.
pull that.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull that up here a minute, and I'm going to tell you the name of the movie. And I haven't seen it actually. I'm going to watch it.
Yeah.
What the hell was it? You'd be surprised. Oh, The Prey in '83.
Huh.
Check that out too. I'm going to, because when I was watching that trailer, I'm thinking, this looks awfully familiar. 20 years later, Wrong Turn. And I love the first Wrong Turn.
Yeah.
I freaking love that movie. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to like The Prey. But, you know, I'm stuck in the 80s music. I'm stuck in the 80s movies because that was my childhood growing up.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get away from it. I mean, even some of the early 90s stuff is good. And of course, today's movies, you know, they're going to be good because they're high budgets, like The Conjuring and all them. Everybody's going to like them because it's a much bigger budget. But I like getting films sent to me. Like I have 5 right now. I am so far behind them, trying to get caught up. But there's films that, you know, that they know a lot of, for doing this for so long. I think I was talking to a director from Ohio a couple weeks ago. I interviewed him, and we've been friends since I started out in 2010 on Facebook, you know, from the podcast. And he says, Scott, and I sat back one night, I'm thinking, okay, well, this podcast was going when I started. This one was going when I started. They're all gone. And here I am 13 years later, and I'm still here. I'm thinking, well, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I weathered the storm. It's a lot of work to consistently try to work, take care of family, and do what you enjoy. You know, it's hard to keep it going, but it's like a filmmaker. You start a film, it can take you a year before it's done. Anything can happen. I shot a film in 2012 that finally got released last February because of, you know, the producer moving or getting married or the director moved to California, whatever. But it happens. And I'm just babbling on and on and on about my life. But I understand all the aspects of props. I've done it. You know, I'm actually available to sign to go to SAG. Nice. I got an invite like last year or so. So I haven't decided to join yet. Yeah. Because I've done a lot of independent. But when you do that, then it kind of pulls you away from independent stuff. You know what I mean? I'm undecided on what I want to do.
Yeah.
But
Well, I know there's
I mean,
Extra SAG, and then there's FICOR 2, which is like another one. It's a little bit more open, I think, to indie. And then, of course, right now, with everything that's happening, it's pretty crazy out there. But yeah, I don't know. It's to go to your point about the like the low budget and then intention. I think some of it I think is we were running so fast. I think we were at the camp for like 2 weeks. I think we shot 13 of those days. So we were going every night, and it's a lot to get done. I mean, I still was like, because we had our shoot schedule was we kind of gradually went into the night. So we had our first 2 days were 8 to 8s, and then we did 2 splits at 2 to 2, and then the rest of it was 6 to 6. And then the crew came from, I started like a nonprofit, just not even nonprofit, just like a film workshop in the back of this film studio in Champaign, I think in 2017 or 16. But basically like just high school and college kids started coming in, and over a couple of years we built up to about 15 people or so. And so by the time we went into the film, I kind of had my film crew, and this was the first time that they'd ever worked on a film before. Some of them had worked on smaller sets or whatever, but this was the first time we were like at the camp, staying there the entire time, doing a ton of like night forest exterior lighting, which is tough, And so we were rushing, but I think with the blood stuff, I think, I had kind of always kind of thought more towards Halloween, like the original John Carpenter's Halloween, in terms of like the violence, because I was more interested in the tension and the suspense. So like there's a scene in there where like Miles or Mario and like Ronnie are trying to patch up Kelly, and then they hear Georgia like way off in the woods or whatever. And so I love those kinds of things where there's this building, growing tension versus just heads getting lopped off and which we just never kind of budget for. And then sometimes there were scenes where, because of what the film was kind of about, because I went through in my personal life some situation with somebody that was kind of like the villain of my film, with a lot of gaslighting and stuff like that. So I wanted, like, there's one kill where like Mike kills the deputy sheriff. And then I wanted to show that in a wide because I didn't really want to punch in, because I wanted it to be like Lexi's reaction to this whole thing. And then when Mike turns around and says like, he's the killer, Lexi, he's the killer, that's really what I wanted the audience to see, not really the gore so much, And so so there was just a lot of stuff like that where it was kind of intentional. But then of course, it's just funny because it's like I was doing a music documentary, and they talk a lot about like timing of everything. And so sometimes like I talked to a couple of guys I interviewed, like I think their album came out like 2 weeks before Nirvana's Nevermind came out. And they were like, like a metal band or something. And then that came out, and everybody was like onto like the flannel kind of stuff. And so I think to me, it was funny because it's like, we just happened to launch this the year of like Terrifier 2, when it's like, forget it. You don't have that level of gore or whatever. And so, I think it's just, and I think I appreciate what you're talking about, because like, I feel like it was always interesting to me to talk to people who had been there for that golden age of that early slasher, who saw our film. And I feel like they really were like, oh, this is totally reminds me of X, Y, and Z. And I feel like the modern audiences don't really get that as much. And so it's okay. I mean, it's okay. It's whatever. You learn not to take anything personally.
Now, you mentioned Terrifier 2, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, now look. Terrifier 1, I liked because it was something different. But when I watched Terrifier 2, I said it in a review, and I'll say it now. The gore in that movie was overdone.
Yeah.
It was too much, unnecessary. The director's a fucking asshole. I posted my review that had his trailer in the review.
Yeah.
Okay. I've done it for 12 years. I got a copyright strike because his audio of his trailer was in my review. He's the only one that did it. And to me, that's just disrespectful.
Yeah.
He can get fucked. For all, and I hope he hears it, because I don't give a shit. Because I sent him a nice email about it. It's ridiculous. Yeah. I'm not hurting you. I'm not hurting you at all. But this is after the fact. This is not before I seen part 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's gore and there's overdone, like the bed scene in Terror for 2.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Overdone,
Yeah.
stupid, dumb, overdone.
Yeah.
So there's gore and there's too much
Yeah.
of nonsense. I mean, if the gore was necessary, yes, fine and dandy.
Yeah.
But yeah, but
Well, it was interesting to me because I think, again, like I came from somebody who, like, I'm a survivor, and so I wanted to make the film about being a survivor. And we had set medics from the Danville Fire Department were on set with us, and when we were doing some of the blood scenes for where Kelly is on the table and they're trying to get his bleeding stopped or whatever, and just to me, like, I remember kind of as I'm filming it, you know, I'm looking over and I saw the set medic who was a firefighter, like, watching, and it seemed pretty real to him. You know. Yeah. And then my dad, he was a paramedic for 35 years and he had PTSD from being in the field. And, you know, he always would joke, he's like, about these kind of gory movies, is like, oh, that's cute. Yeah, that's really cute. Like, I've seen way worse. Nothing could top anything that he's ever seen, you know. And so that's the thing, I think, is like, there's really no, you know, I don't know. It's interesting. I think, to me, I can't just have it be that. I need something more than just the gore. Otherwise, it's like a geek show or something, you know.
Yeah.
You know, but it's, you know, I guess that, to me, I appreciate the fact that, like, what they're doing for indie horror is like getting indie horror out there more. I mean, even like a film like Skinamarink, which is, people were like, what is that? Which I just love the fact that this thing is out there doing this thing. You know, I mean, it just gives me hope for my own stuff. And
right.
So I think in that sense. And then, you know, I think filmmakers always have you know, you're always going to run into different kinds of filmmakers and egos and stuff like that. And so I think, like, it's funny to me because I remember, like, you know, like, all of a sudden, like, our film came out, I was pushing it, and then like 2 weeks later it was like pirated. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess. I mean, you can only control what you can control. And so I think, to me, it's
I did see that. I did see it online. I did see that.
And so I think, to me, I go back to, like, that it's a miracle to be here after everything we went through. Like, we had all these con artists, equity investors try to steal the film like 4 days before we started. And it, I mean, we would not even be here, you know, so it's a miracle to be here. So the fact that, like, you know, if someone's like, I hated this movie, I'm like, this is a miracle. It's a miracle that I hate this movie. I love it. It's because, you know, it's like you were talking about just how long it takes to make a movie sometimes. It's like, this started in 2019, just as an idea, and just started to go to location scouting, and I started to build the story around the pieces in the camp. And then summer of 2020, you know, we went out, we shot the teaser trailer. I was on a film before that. It was like the first film to get back up in the state of Illinois using like the COVID stuff. So I was able to learn from that to take all the COVID protocols to our set. And then August 2021, we were out there shooting. But yeah, it's been, I think I edited for like, I don't know how long, but it feels like I've been with this damn movie forever.
So what movie were you working on before that?
There was a film called Revealer. It came out, I think, on Shudder this past year. So my friend Luke Boyce, he was the director on that. And there's a lot of the crew that I'd worked on other films with. I'd work on some documentaries for Netflix, and then some other. There was this A24 horror movie called Slice that we worked on. I worked on that briefly, but I've done a lot of music videos with, like, you know, like my friend Jeff Schroeder, who was in the Smashing Pumpkins, and I did some videos for Smashing Pumpkins too. And so I think it was just one of those things where, like, you're building your skills over time.
Yeah.
And so when you, like, this was my first film, and I learned so much from it. You know, I learned, like, oh my God, so many things. You know, like, it's like a freaking PhD in, like, what not to do, basically. And it, from everything, and, like, from, like, the development to the script writing to the shooting to the editing to to dealing with, like, distributors to AFM to all that, and just everything. I mean, it was crazy. So there was so like I could talk for probably all day about all the stuff I learned and still have more to talk about.
Yeah, well, I can talk more and more about the film as well.
Yeah.
I actually watched it more than once. I mean, I don't really say that too often because but I just like to show people, my family and friends, and there's a lot of gurus like me and my age that we grew up together watching 80s movies and say, hey, because you'd be surprised at how many people that have no idea what independent films are.
Right.
I mean, they see Redbox. I mean, there is some independent in Redbox, but most of them, they go for the big name titles. So when I say, hey, come on over and let's watch this, I want you to tell me what you think about it. And I just want to get an honest opinion over somebody who doesn't really watch independent films, and they watch this, and two things they said. It reminds them of Friday the 13th and oh god, what's the camp movie?
Oh my god, Camp or The Burning?
The Burning, and also the one with oh my god, I'm gonna kick myself in the ass. The one where the girl was a boy.
Oh, Sleepaway Camp, yeah.
Sleepaway Camp. Gosh, God forgive me for forgetting that title on the spot. But and they enjoyed it. They did. I mean, and the first thing they said was, "Oh my God, look, 1981." I said, "That's exactly what I said."
Right.
There's some of these old 80s stuff that you don't have to show gore for a good movie.
Yeah.
But that being said, so that's why I wanted you to come on here. So I really wanted to express my opinions and get people to know about this film. And even though it's being pirated, but I guess being pirated is a good thing too, I guess. I mean, your movie's getting out there some way, but
we're playing right now in the Philippines in movie theaters, which is crazy. It's like what it's so bizarre that we had an interesting run. I think I did festivals for about, I want to say like 14 months. I think our premiere was last August at Popcorn Frights, and we've kind of played all over the place. We had a really awesome drive-in premiere, like in my kind of hometown area, and that was scary because we were premiering opposite Halloween Ends on like their opening night. So I was like preparing for the blowout, but we actually did really well. We outsold them, and it was, I think, to me, like to go to like setting this, because I always love like kind of have a context around things. So to me, it's like to have a slasher film at a drive-in is kind of like the most drive-in thing you could do,
most badass thing you could do.
Oh yeah. I was like, I'm gonna get some popcorn, a hot dog, I'm gonna get some Twizzlers and a cherry Coke, and I just
there you go.
I had like it was funny because like my cousins came down, and when I was a kid, like my cousins were older than me. One of them worked at a video store in the 80s. I think one of them was about your age, and they would just all the time tell me about like horror movies, Michael Myers, and who would win in a fight between Freddy or Jason, like all of the 80s, and so then, and I just remember always hearing them talk about these movies and laughing about some of the things. And so I remember even when we were making it, kind of thinking about what my cousin Tim might say or my cousin Doug might say. And so when they came down to watch the drive-in, after it was over, they were talking to me, and it was probably like the greatest moment for me because they were like, "Oh man, when he hit him in the head with that pool noodle and all that, he's swinging the bat," and it was kind of a surreal moment because this is how I've heard them talk about other movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, like Dream Warriors and stuff like that. And so it was really special to hear them talk about this film, especially knowing kind of like what you're talking about is like they grew up on these films. And so so I think I kind of love that because I know like sometimes I feel like horror can get kind of heavy into the depressing trauma thing, and I just go back to like all the films I love, like My Bloody Valentine and Black Christmas and Halloween and Dream Warrior.
Bloody Birthday, Happy Birthday to Me.
I just watched. Sorry.
I interviewed Courtney Gaines from Children of the Corn. He's Malachi, the main character in there. And that was a cool experience for me too, because now he's really close to my age, a couple years older than me, but we grew up in the same era. And I think that one of the first things I said to him was, it's funny, Courtney, when I watched Children of the Corn, I was 16. I said, I was 3 years away from getting killed. He laughed out like crazy. It was,
oh man,
it was great.
Yeah. No,
but, So what else do you have going on?
So right now we're just prepping for part two, and so we've been doing a lot. Because I think like for me, like this, there are lots of things that I wanted to do um, to kind of continue the story. So if the first one is kind of so there's three films in the idea I had because I wanted to feel like an 80s franchise, and so I was like, oh, if we do a part two, it would be this. And so if the first one is really themed around fight or flight, which is why everything is just kind of happening. The second one I wanted it to be about how truth is dangerous because as things from the camp are kind of coming out, there's basically there's kind of a structure in this town that's been there for a long time that's now like really falling apart. It's almost like this, it's like there's this power vacuum that's created. But but I'm really excited for part two because I feel like I learned so much on part one that I want to do more with it. And then, even watching like a movie like The Creator, because the thing with the first one is when my first film, I had like a crew of like 19 people on it. I had like 10 actors on set most every day. It was the scale of it was like basically like we were shooting like a 1980s studio film with like no money. We had like a 16 grand Kickstarter. I think I had like maybe 15 more or maybe 10 grand more while we were shooting, but it was insanely stressful and really, really intense shoot. But there's just so much stuff I learned from it. And so with this next one, I've been kind of like, we've been starting to do a lot of camera tests and lighting tests and looking at like smaller form factors for the camera. And we've been going to, so the whole play is kind of, the film takes place in 1993. So it's 2 years after this one. And it kind of takes place in this local college town that is, connected to Camp Silver Lake. And so it's been great. I went to, so we're shooting in Danville next summer, or probably next September actually. And it's kind of like the entire set is like in this area that's kind of frozen again, like kind of timeless. It's like it's very like 80s, 1970s, 1980s downtown. So I would say like it probably has more of a visual connection to like the original, like the Halloween 2 kind of thing in terms of that nighttime kind of feel. But I'm really excited. Tom Matthews is coming back. Ari Lehman from the original Jason's going to be in it. What's her name? Lauren Marie Taylor played Vicky in part 2 is going to be in it. Bishop Stevens is back again. But I think Tom Matthews will be in a bigger role. So I've just kind of described it as like there's elements of 7 and Halloween 2 and kind of like has more of like a music feel. So I think like the thing that like when people talk about slasher films, they're always like, oh, these characters are so like shallow or whatever, and I'm like, well, sometimes I think it's like, well, you have one night to tell your story in, right? Like all this stuff happens over one night. And if there's always like cat and mouse stuff going, like how deep can you really get into some of these characters,
Well, yeah.
And especially like if you have 8, it's like, well, then what are you going to spend 90 minutes on 8 different characters getting to learn about them?
Shallow.
Sometimes you just have to have the asshole that gets killed off, like the jock or something, But but I think like for the story, it takes place over a week now instead of like over a night. So I think it's going to be a chance for us to get to know some of the characters more. And then there's just stuff that I couldn't do in the first one just because of budget. So I wanted to have So now I've got a friend of mine who's done a bunch of special like practical effects for films for Shudder. So he's going to do a lot of the practical, kind of more like Tom Savini-esque, practical kills and stuff. And so we've been talking a lot about, like I kind of showed him like, all right, like let's look at The Prowler for some ideas. And then there was this movie, High Tension that came out not that long ago. And I was like, those are some good ideas too. Not the bookshelf decapitation, but like some of the knife kind of things. And so I think it'll be interesting. And then also I wanted to get into more Steadicam shots because I had like a 10-foot Dana dolly. And so there'd be times when people are like walking through the woods. We'd do like a take where we just go down to the like from one end of the Dana dolly to the next. And then we just kept like leapfrogging the Dana dolly through the forest. Literally like 10 feet at a time forgetting stuff. So sometimes I feel like that's why like some of they seem to be walking slow is because we just ran out of rail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's indie film, it's what you do, what you can. And I go back to, I went to Horror Hound and I was listening to the cast of Night of the Living Dead, and they were talking about making their film and how they said, yeah, we made the best film we could with the resources we had. And that's kind of how I feel about this one. But yeah, so I'm really excited. I think that I'm excited because I feel like I want to make the tone a little bit, a little harder hitting, I think, on this next one. And there's some set pieces that I think are going to be really cool, and really, yeah, like more of the, like just more of the stalking, the lurking stuff, in the background. Like I love like when someone's walking and then the killer's like behind them, but they don't see them at all for a while. So I think as we get into more Steadicam stuff, I think we'll be able to do a lot more of that, which I'm excited about.
Well, I'm excited too. I'm really anxious to see how 2 is going to turn out. So
yeah. I think pretty good. I definitely it'll have a bigger 90s influence because it's set in 1993. I graduated high school in 1994. So to me, it's like as a period film, I think whenever you're doing a period film, like if the production designer is from that era, then everything that they choose feels true. And I think that's why like I love like the Stranger Things stuff, because it's like sometimes I watch Stranger Things, I'm like, holy shit, my mom had that like Lord and Taylor bag or something. Like the stuff that they did was so great. Or even like to go to J.J. Abrams' Super 8, I'm like, that's my uncle's kitchen, like that they're in right now. And so I think with some of these throwbacks, I think they don't really hit it right. They do it like this is what we think people were like in the 80s, and so they go to that thing, versus the more muted kind of 80s. And so no, I'm excited. I think that it's probably going to be like a total time warp for me to be shooting this thing. That's like 1994, because it's going to feel weird just to see all the shit that I saw like when I was in high school. But yeah, but I just wanted, I'm just glad to. It's really nice to be able to talk to you, because I think it was just cool to hear, like, I feel like you really got like what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with slasher films, with the audiences, I think sometimes people have such strong expectations of like what it should be or whatever. And so it was really encouraging to hear your take on it too. So
yeah, well, first of all, nobody should ever go into an expectations for anything independent. I mean, to be honest, it's open-minded. It's because now I can see somebody having expectations for a bigger budget film because they have money to use.
Yeah.
But if you're going into an independent film, the expectation that you should be doing is watching it, respect what you see. If you don't like it, you don't like it. It's fine and dandy. But you really have to understand that, hey, think about what you're seeing, ask questions, and then you might understand. The younger generation today have no idea. I mean, now I had my nephew and I, when he was 15, we did the Puke 'em Up podcast for about 2 years. And I got him involved into watching independent films because he didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
And he really enjoyed the films that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. Again, these younger generation, all they know is what their friends say in school. Oh yeah, The Conjuring,
right? Yeah,
Insidious, or he's a big Jason fan. He loves Friday the 13th, which is cool for his age. But these younger generation have no idea unless their parents watch it and they understand it. But I just love his reaction when I was showing him some of these independent films.
Yeah.
I mean, I even showed him the Cannibal Holocaust in 1980. Oh, wow. I really wanted to see how he would react to that.
Yeah.
And I was just curious, but I wanted him to get a chance to taste all kinds of movies. Now, that podcast in the hiatus because he moved to West Virginia. I just continue on with my thing, but I love teaching. I've taught another kid. We did Gruesome and Gore for a little bit for a year, teaching him the basics of podcasting about independent films. So, I did my part. I act in independent film. I've done voiceover work for independent trailers.
Yeah.
So I've done it all. So, I'm complete. I mean, I wasn't expecting to do none of this stuff. It just happened.
I think it's important to educate, because I was surprised doing the workshop, working with like college kids, where I asked them about movies, and they'd never seen a lot of the movies that I was referencing. And so I was like, man, you got to go and rent all these films. So I would just have lists of movies for everybody to watch. And to me, it was like, this is like, what do you mean you've never seen Pulp Fiction before? Are you kidding me? Like, hold up now. Like, you've never seen The Godfather? What the hell? So like, it was, so I think like having a film literacy is really important, film vocabulary, especially like if you want to make films, because to go to like the last 10 years, it's like you cannot look at a Marvel movie and know how to make a film. Like, there is no point at which you can see a $250 million like glorified video game that you can't play and be like, oh, I know what a 50 millimeter looks like. But if you go to like a 70s film or 80s film, it's like you can study the construction of a film. You can see, I like how they did this dolly in there, or they did this cool, whatever, or that's a 85 versus a 50 versus that's a 24 millimeter lens. Like, you'll learn so much more. And I think, to me, it's like, that was what was encouraging about seeing The Creator. Was I looked at it as like one big lesson for how to do part 2, which was just throw all that shit that people normally tell you, like, oh, you need this. I mean, there's the whole thing. Everybody was always telling me what I needed to do. You need this, you need that, and obviously sometimes they were right, but sometimes they were just like, I'm like, we are not that film. We are not this $150,000 film. We're like a 16 grand Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Miracle. And so I think like to have, and even to go back to like El Mariachi, like the Robert Rodriguez one, it's like, that's always a kind of a touchstone, or even, and I feel like that's even more of a film school than like a Kevin Smith's, what was that one he did, Clerks or whatever, which was great. But it's like, I feel like what Robert Rodriguez did with El Mariachi was like, he made this action film.
Yeah.
On $7 grand. No one does that. Like, you could shoot on black and white with your friends at like your, grocery store, and that's simple enough. But like, this dude's jumping off buses and shit like that is insane. So I think, to your point, like, not to get long-winded, but like, yeah, I think it's really important to go back and see that stuff, especially for someone who's interested in filmmaking. Right.
If you ever get a chance, I want you to go on my YouTube channel and look for the Daniel Pearl interview. He was a cinematographer for Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, yeah.
I want you to listen to what he says about the making of Chainsaw Massacre. I think you're going to learn a lot from what he's going to say. Oh, yeah. Dude, he's great. I just messaged him briefly on Instagram and stuff. And then I totally forgot he also shot the new one, 2003. Yeah. And he shot the reboot of Friday the 13th of 2009 one, and that was one I took a lot of big cues from. For like, I always laughed at how there was like lens flare in the forest, and so I wanted to do a lot of that. But yeah, he's probably one of my favorite cinematographers, because he has that darkness to him, and he's like, I don't know, he's like, I'm not really a dark guy, but I seem to always do these films that are moody, and I love that. And like the stuff he did with Texas Chainsaw Massacre was just beautiful and cool and evocative. And I mean, that scene where they're like under the, when she's walking to the house and they go under he talks about that in the interview. Yeah, listen to it. It's really cool. Yeah. So cool. And he's probably from what I've heard, like one of the nicest people. So that's good too. He's very nice when we talk to him. He's very down to earth, very nice. And he'll explain how he got involved with it. You got to hear it. It's pretty cool. Oh, yeah. But, yeah. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate the conversation. I think hopefully this movie that you did, it's been out for a while now, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be around for a while. And I'm going to do my best to keep pushing this baby on my old heads like me to get an idea of what an 80s throwback looks like. Well, again, takes place in 91, but, it is what it is. 81 was a top year for it. So, it's only 10 years later. Okay. Well, thanks, man. Thanks again. And have a good night. Yeah, John, you take care of yourself, and I'll get this thing posted, and I'll let you know, and I'll post on your wall. Awesome. Thank you. I'll see you later. Take care, buddy. We'll see you.